Hey everybody, welcome to this issue of Staffing Monthly, the staffing industry's digital publication where we interview thought leaders in the space to bring you actionable insights around the topics of marketing, recruiting, sales, leadership, technology. And today we're going to be talking about a very important leadership topic because it relates to the most important thing in the staffing industry, and that's our people. And for those of you that have been in this industry for a long time, you realize that the pandemic was disruptive, not just to the industry, but to the people. And it feels like we've just been running on sand ever since with no real chance to catch up, to catch our breath and really rebalance ourselves and figure out, how do we have that balanced, work life, situation that we all crave. So there's somebody that I've actually been seeing a lot of their content on LinkedIn that talks about this, that really talks about kind of the mental and emotional well-being of producers, of employees, and specifically in staffing. And I was following this person, reading their articles, and I'm like, holy cow, this is a really important topic that we need to discuss in a conversation that needs to be had. So I went out and I requested an interview with Ashley Andersen from EzraSage. And if you're not familiar with this company, definitely check them out because they're doing some pretty groundbreaking work in the industry. And what they really focus on is helping organizations become healthier places to work, better culture, all of that really important stuff that matters to people. But what that does is it helps unlock the performance of top performers, which creates better employee retention, especially if you're more talented people. And it also improves your talent attraction. So with that, Ashley, thank you so much for being here and contributing to Staffing Monthly.
Oh my gosh, Dan, the pleasure is all mine. I was so excited when you reached out because, to your point, this is an extremely important topic that we need to be talking about in the workplace. It's not going anywhere. So I appreciate you offering up the space and time.
Yeah, no, my pleasure for sure. And I was definitely talking to Therese Gopal Robinson last month, who's doing some work in this space, really trying to equip leaders to create better environments for their people, kind of a balance of empowerment and professional development, but also recognizing that people need space to process their work, process how they respond to their work. So I think this is a great addition to that. So let's just level set, just overall, forget about staffing just for a second. Just tell me, what are you seeing out there in the world of professional work as it relates to how people are doing mentally and emotionally?
Yeah, not great is the overall consensus. No, it's tricky because our emotional health and our emotional well-being, it often changes day to day. And even within any given day, we have our ups and our downs. But if we look at kind of the broad picture of how people are doing, they are overwhelmed. They are really sapped with a lot of heavy emotions. I try to steer away from positive and negative, like that kind of connotation around emotions, but really heavy emotions, uncertainty, fear, anxiety, grief. There's a lot of change. There's a lot of loss occurring around us, especially in workplaces. And that brings with it grief, any kind of um, loss or longing. People are lonely. It's great to be able to operate in this very digital world over Zoom and whatnot. But what that's resulted in is a lot of detachment from one another, a lot of transactional relationships, and a lot of subsequent loneliness. There's plenty of opportunity for us to make some improvements within ourselves.
So I see the same thing, and we're gonna shift specifically focused on the staffing industry now. And it's sort of I think everything you just described is really hitting the staffing industry producers. And I feel like it's at probably all levels, but I feel like it's probably heaviest at the recruiter level.
Mm.
And, the sales producer out there, they've been facing some pretty tough challenges. So what do you think coming through the pandemic? I think everyone understands like, hey, the pandemic was a massive disruptor. So it's, it's logical that people would be impacted on that on a personal and professional level. But the pandemic started almost 5 years ago today, to the day, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, today, right? As we're recording this interview, 5 years ago today it started. And we've been, I would say, past it by most measures for a couple of years at least, right? Um, but it feels like things are still getting heavier. So why is that? Like, what is going on over the last couple of years after the pandemic when things have sort of returned to quote unquote normal?
Mhm.
Why are things still like this?
Yeah. I mean, the repercussions of the pandemic, whether you're talking about something like the healthcare space where there was just unprecedented influx of need for folks to be caring for the people that were sick, or supply chain issues. Those are challenges that don't just, dissolve because now we have a vaccine and now people aren't getting as sick, or we have a better control over the virus. Like those do take plenty of time. But I think also the pandemic shifted us kind of like culturally, and really brought us face to face with things like mortality and what was important to us on a values level as human beings. Um, and it also brought a kind of a panic that has been, on in the foundation of who we are and how we operate, and that really hasn't gone away. And there's been a lot of other influential factors, the global economy and changes in administration, which are not necessarily connected to the pandemic, but you just kind of add everything on top of it. And the thing with staffing that is unique is it touches all industries, right? So, and I know the people in staffing, their passion and their mission is about people. It's about putting people to work and helping people to, take care of their family and put a roof over their head. And that passion comes from the heart. And when you are a heart centered person, all of these hits really affect you. So I think there are a few special circumstances for the staffing industry. It's incredibly fast moving. It's incredibly competitive. That just sort of compound all of which all of that which the pandemic sort of revealed to us, whether it be kind of the more logistical supply chain issues, or the more emotional, who am I and what's my purpose and what do I want to do with my life kind of questions.
That makes sense. What is your thought about as you're sitting there talking, that the things are swirling through my head about kind of obviously we face some cyclical challenges in this industry and we started to swing back, but there's been some major structural disruption to our industry when we were already facing a talent shortage and a talent gap. So it was hard to find talent, which is, for the longest time, the toughest challenge we faced. But now with the disbursement and remote work, becoming a thing, and some companies realizing like, hey, this is great. And a lot of people really leaning into it and maybe moving further out into away from the urban centers of work and more the heavily populated. So now it's harder to find talent. And I think the way that consumers have changed their behaviors online, I think all of that has changed the way that talent is found.
Mhm.
So we have a whole new need to change and adopt to how talent needs to be interacted with to basically attract them and put them into roles. And there's a whole new suite of resources, but we're also a very kind of a laggard industry, as
Mhm.
far as tech adoption. So do you feel like there's constraints there that are weighing on people, with companies like having a huge demand to fill all these jobs, but then at the same time, it's getting harder to find work because they're more displaced. There's less available workers around the jobs where they're at for people that need in-person work. And then there's new tools rolling out that we haven't really had in the past. And there's like a kind of a quick learning curve that you have to adopt. Like, do you think all of these things are creating a confluence of kind of stress and anxiety?
I mean, as you're talking about it, Dan, I'm feeling stressed and anxious. So yeah, I definitely think that that's real life contributing factors. And it's, the old saying of building the plane while flying it. It's the definition of that. And if you really think about building a plane while flying it, that's very stressful and anxiety producing. And it's frustrating. Like, I've never met somebody in this industry who didn't want to do a really good job, regardless of what their role was.
Yeah.
And I fundamentally believe that for the most part, people come to work and show up to work and want to do well in what they're doing. And so when you have all of these constraints that are seemingly operating against you, or you're trying to catch up all the time, and then there's something new and something else has changed, and you just feel like you can never get to that point of really like competency. It's really draining. It's really draining, and it can really challenge our sense of self-worth and relevancy and what we have to offer. And that all contributes to that overwhelm, that stress, burnout, etc.
Interesting. So do you think, so that's a really good point that you hit on with, we feel like we're always playing catch up. We obviously feel like we're trying to achieve some next level of competency, that the goal is put on the other side of happiness, using Sean Archer's I guess definition from the happiness advantage. And then you mentioned self-worth in there. So do you feel like maybe when we're sitting here as an industry that's a bit flailing the last 2 to 3 years, we've been on a little bit of a downward trend, that the producers, recruiter and sales, are sort of getting hammered, like, do better, do more. We're going to give you all these tools because we got to improve your performance. We got to improve your capacity. Do you think, even though the intentions are well placed, maybe there's an unintended consequence, that the message that the producer is hearing is, I'm not good enough? And maybe that's just starting to internalize that. Do you think that's happening?
100%. Yeah, 100%. I work with folks one-on-one, a lot of executives in the space, in coaching relationships. I work with folks in groups, and I see it all the time. And nobody's showing up going, I feel like my self-worth is really low, but you hear them talk about not being good enough, not being able to really get ahead, and you can see it in their face, you can hear it in their words. Absolutely. I mean, if all we're being handed are like technical tools, and our emotional selves are not also being cared for and tended to, it's easy to just continuously feel like down on yourself, down on your work. um, it's getting beaten down. Do more with less, do more faster. It's not that people don't want to do more. They absolutely do. Like I said, everybody I've ever met in this industry, they care so deeply about the ultimate work of putting people to work. And to do more would mean more people at work. And so, of course, people want to achieve in that way. People love their work and they love their career, but we have this conundrum whereby people are being asked to, or expected to, sacrifice themselves in service of their career. And so what we're really aiming to do through mental strength and conditioning programs is to allow people to have both, to have that drive, that ambition for their work, but also be well, and not have to sacrifice themselves in service of their career.
Yeah, I think that's what we should all aspire to, is to create that balance. So two things I want to try to uncover quickly before we talk to maybe some actionable solutions that leaders can take. Let's talk about, what are some of the symptoms? Like, if you're a leader of an organization, right, and you're engaging with your people, whether it be, a single branch organization or you've got branches in every state, doesn't matter, the size. But if you're a leader in an organization or of an organization, what are some of the symptoms? Like, what are the things that you should be on the lookout for? The words people are saying, the behaviors that really would confirm that you have an organizational health issue that is causing a kind of a major negative detriment or impact to your people.
Yeah. So the World Health Organization has three kind of markers for burnout in particular. And they're kind of they're pretty high level, but one is around persistent exhaustion. The other is disengagement from your work, and then lowered efficiency and effectiveness in your work. And so, you kind of are like, okay, what does that look like
Yeah.
for the everyday person? And this is one of the reasons why for leaders, and our leaders are under so much pressure as well. I know that this is a difficult ask, but it's so important to know your people, because what you're really looking for is a change in who they are, their personality, their approach, their passion, their fire, their drive. If you haven't taken the time to really get to know people on an individual level, you're going to have a harder time to noticing those changes. And the earlier you can kind of jump in, and it's not like you have to stop everything and pull this person aside. But if you start to notice those little changes in attitude, maybe somebody's usually pretty easygoing and now they're getting really defensive or snippy with their colleagues. Maybe they used to be really reliable in terms of their work product, and now you're finding mistakes that are really that are not like them. That's a really opportune time to check in with them and see how they are doing, in a genuine way, more than just saying, how are you doing? Good. Okay. Because there's a lot of, especially with top performers, there's a lot of stigma still around this concept of burning out, or even, being overwhelmed to the point that your work is being affected. And so there can be a reluctance to engage in conversations talking about it. So noticing those changes in attitude, behavior, if they're getting a little bit more detached from the team, a little bit more apathetic, like they don't really care as much. Those are really great signs that you should start to intervene. Is a little bit of a dramatic word, but start to have conversations.
Is it though? Is intervene a dramatic word?
Yeah, I guess it's
I think it's an appropriate word. I think if you're seeing those symptoms and this sort of toxicity, if you will, this sort of negative kind of a mental emotional space is taking hold on your organization, I don't think intervene is too strong of a word. But before we get to the intervention piece, I just want to be very stark and paint the picture. What happens to organizations that leave this unchecked? If they let this go unchecked, what happens to the organization?
Yeah, I mean, the data show there's a huge cost. So we know that there's more than $300 billion annually lost due to burnout. And that's due to things like absenteeism and
I'm sorry,
health.
300 billion with a B.
300 billion in the US market alone. Yeah. Because this affects everything. When you are at this stage of burnout, like I just said, you're detached, you're apathetic, you are exhausted, like perpetually exhausted, not anything that a nap or a vacation is going to take care of. You are compromising client relationships. If you're so on edge, you can start to see some of those client relationships be affected, internal relationships. It puts more pressure on managers to now have to manage performance. So that's taking them away from some of their more strategic tasks. Of course, there's retention challenges, people checking out, either literally leaving the company or figuratively and showing up, but not really doing the work. So all kinds of ramifications, some really hard costs, and then some of those softer costs that linger and can be connected to the bottom line.
So that's, I think that paints a pretty accurate picture. And I think to sum it up, that if you're a leader in and of an organization and you have aspirations to grow your organization, you cannot do it if you have signs of burnout within the organization. You just can't do it. Your people will not get you where you want to go. And it's
Correct.
not the people in that scenario. It's not you, it's the organization that needs to be looked at. So,
Yeah.
and which I think to set up the last topic I want to explore today with the actionable insights, it's funny, you're talking about all these things where burnout decreases, capacity,
Mhm.
right? And we think about all of the tools and the training and everything we're trying to add, AI and automations and all of these things that we're trying to add is designed to increase the capacity of our people, which makes me wonder. And again, it's a great intention, but it makes me wonder, are we trying to increase the capacity because there's a diminished capacity due to burnout,
Mm.
right? And we're trying to compensate by giving them something else to manage, do, learn, and we're only exacerbating the problem. And maybe when we're actually introducing these new tools, these new methods, processes, all of these things, these projects, that we're putting more on the plate of an already burnout person, and we're never going to recoup that increase in capacity that we're trying. We're never going to see the technology or process adoption like we envision, because there's just their capacity is constrained because of burnout, and which leads me to where I want to go next is, what if we thought about it differently? What if we said, hey, why is this person's capacity constrained? Is it truly like they're operating at 100% and they're the no burnout, like they're just locked in? And if I give them some no tools, they'll make them more efficient. That's an ideal scenario. But if it's, hey, you know what, they're operating at 70 or 80% because they're burnout, or 50 or 60 because they're burnout, maybe investing some of the money into mental and emotional well-being projects or programs to get your people's capacity up is a better investment than new tools, AI, to automation. What is your thought about that, Ashley?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. Let
I have
me
all
see
the
if
thoughts.
I
She's got
can
all the thoughts.
make them concise. But, I think, yes, culturally, we're obsessed with productivity. And so I think part of it is in response to, or could very well be in response to what you're talking about, like seeing lowered productivity because people are burned out. And so throwing these tools at them. And in leadership and people management, we tend to lean really hard into the technical tools. And what's the new platform, the new software, the new that we can implement in order to solve whatever problem it is that we're seeing. And when we're talking about human beings, it's not that easy. We are complex, and we need to really tools are fantastic, and it's not an either or, it's a both and. Let's leverage technology and continue down that road, but let's not leave the human behind in the meantime, and let's make sure that we are also skilling up and giving tools to the human, so that they can have that strong that mental strength to be able to withstand and succeed and thrive in these really high pressure environments, because that pressure is not going anywhere. So, why don't we also skill people up in terms of their own emotional health and strength, as well as their, knowledge and proficiency with the technology that's advancing.
So I love that, and I want to go a little bit deeper on that. So how do we skill people up in this capacity so they can achieve higher level of performance because they're achieving that inner balance? How does an executive, put your executive coaching hat on for a second and just say, hey, if this is how you need to be looking at this to help your people thrive?
Mhm. Yeah, you have to work with the human. And that's tricky when you're in a corporate environment and the expertise of the folks in the company is not around human psychology and human behavior. And that's really where programs like ours have are a great fit, because we bring that clinical approach, the background in psychology and executive coaching, to be able to work with the human. So what we do in our programs, whether it's coaching or our cohort-based programs, we work with people on skills around emotional regulation. There are like 86, I think the research is up to 86 different emotions that are popping up for us all the time. I can see your eyes are like,
That's shock. I'm shocked. Is that one
yeah,
of them? Is that one of the 86? Is shocking?
yes, yes,
I'm
there
in
you go.
shock right now. 86.
Yeah, 86. And when we don't understand ourselves on that emotional level, then we don't understand those emotional reactions. So, when we are given bad news and we're feeling something, if we don't know what we're feeling, then we don't understand what we need. And we are just like reacting all day long. And those reactivities can wreak havoc in our working relationships and our relationship with work itself. So we teach people emotional regulation and a different relationship with your emotions so that you're in the driver's seat, not them. You're choosing your responses, not just reacting to the stress and the overwhelm and the anxiety around you. And we teach people how to use stress to their advantage. So we bring in a lot of kind of sports psychology, performance psychology tactics. If you think about athletes or folks in the special forces, like they are under a lot of stress. And how is it that they can use that stress for their benefit? And so we teach skills in that area, relational depth. So how do you have more genuine, trust-based, empathetic relationships versus the transactional ones we have? And then resilience is the final kind of bucket of skills that we lean into, but resilience more around going back to that self-worth. So, how do you detangle your sense of self and self-worth from your achievements, so that it's not so fragile when things get upended or there are these typical disappointments in work, failures. And so how do you recover from those in an effective way so you can keep moving forward? You're not what I call slimed by that upset.
So I want to ask a very specific question. I know we're getting close to time here, but I want to, you're hitting on what I think is an amazing gold nugget that would be great to leave people with. If there was one quick technique that you could teach somebody on how to either regulate their emotions or use stress to their benefit, what could you teach me right here super concisely today?
Yeah, all of what we teach is based in research. So there's a tool from Dr. Andrew Huberman, who's a neuroscientist, and he calls it the physiological sigh. What I love about it is that there's a ton of research behind it, a ton of science behind it, but it's also really easy to do in the moment. So, if you're on a phone call, if you're in a meeting and you can feel yourself getting tense, whatever that looks like for you, you feel your heart starting to race, you're clenching your fists or your jaws tightening. We all have our unique kind of warning signals of like, I'm triggered, right?
Yeah.
A physiological sigh is 2 quick inhales through your nose, if that works, but just really quick. And then 1 longer exhale. 2 quick inhales, 1 long exhale. And there's all this science behind how it activates your diaphragm, which then activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is what's going to help counter that typical freeze, fight, flight stress response, but really quick, really accessible, and easy to remember too.
I love that. I love that. So for all the producers out there that are hearing this today and you realize you have a day ahead of you and you've got a series of days ahead of you, and when you're in the weeds and you're just like, what do I do? 2 short inhales through the nose, long release exhale through the mouth. And I think that's a great, so what did you call, what was the name of the sigh? What was it?
Physiological.
Physiological sigh. I think that's a great technique to land on. Ashley, I appreciate you being here. If anybody wants to reach out and learn more about this or extend this conversation with you or talk about what EzraSage does, what's the best way to connect with you?
The best way is probably through LinkedIn, Ashley Andersen with an SEN, and I have an MSW after my name. I think there's a few of us on there. And EzraSage, we have a page for EzraSage as well. You can visit our website, EzraSageCo.com as well.
Awesome.
find all of that information there.
Cool. I will get all that linked on the page. Thank you so much for being
Thank
here
you.
today, and I hope you enjoy your time in Miami at Exec Forum.
Thanks, Dan.